Hello everybody, welcome to yet another video. It's a movie review today, and without further ado, I am talking about Terminator Dark Fate.
I got a guilty secret to tell before my head explodes.
Before we get any further with this video, I just want to give you a massive warning, spoiler warning, because I will be talking about this in quite some depth. As this film has literally only just really hit, it's only been out, only released this week, so yeah, you've been warned. Click away now if you haven't seen the film yet, or you're about to see it at some point over the next couple of weeks, and then come back when you have actually seen it. Now, there has been some interesting debate. There's been people from America and other people, like, that have actually seen this film already, and there's some interesting debate about this movie. Some people hating on it, and some people actually enjoying it. And so here we go. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Terminator Dark Fate is directed by Tim Miller. Now, if you don't know who Tim Miller is, well, maybe you might know another little movie that came out way back in 2016. Yes, indeed. Tim Miller is the director of the 2016 Deadpool movie that many of us have been wanting for so long, and I love that movie, and he did an incredible job with that. So I had a lot of, I was kind of very anticipating a Terminator movie directed by him. And he teams up with none other than the legendary James Cameron. It's great to see, finally, that it's in his capable hands. I know it's a Tim Miller film, but James Cameron is there to kind of try and keep this movie on track in some shape or form. As we have seen in the past, if I may for a moment kind of take your attention away from Dark Fate for a moment and talk about the films that we've had since Terminator 2 up to very recently with Dark Fate. We had obviously Terminator 1, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is literally like the Empire Strikes Back of this franchise. It is the pinnacle movie. And then we get Rise of the Machines. And now Rise of the Machines is, apparently I've been told, was directed by somebody who was not a fan of the Terminator franchise. It was purposely half-assed because the director just had no interest. I don't know how true that is, but I've been led to believe that is the case. So Rise of the Machines, even though it had an interesting concept, interesting idea, we had the very first female Terminator, that was the baddie Terminator, fighting Arnie, the T-800. I liked that concept. It was more refreshing to see a female version of a Terminator. So that was cool and all, but that film was just terrible. It was bad story, and it is, well, sorry, it's just bad. So moving on, we then got Terminator Salvation. Terminator Salvation, the interesting thing about that with Salvation is I kind of like it to a degree, but it is not in any shape of the word, it is not a good movie. It's not a good movie at all. It's a movie for me that I take bits from it that I do enjoy, which for me, I quite enjoyed Sam Worthington's character, where he was actually he was a Terminator hybrid, where he was part human and part Terminator. I liked that concept, but unfortunately, with the case with when it used to be under MGM were the ones that directed everything from Rise of the Machines all the way through to all the way through to Genesis, and MGM had this stupid notion of not allowing the directors that they have paid to direct these movies. They completely wouldn't allow any creative input from the directors I don't know why, but that was how it was. They literally just put an idea in front of the director and said, we want it done like this. And that is why Salvation and Genesis both kind of sucked. So it was the production company that would not allow any creative input from the director at all. So we had this very robotic movie, very emotionless, and it had no identity and it had no heart, and it just wasn't good enough. Even though, like I said, it had some interesting parts to it, an interesting concept, but it just didn't work. And then we move on to Genesis. Now, Genesis was just an absolute shit for all, because they decided to put all the main things that you do not put in a trailer in the fucking trailers. So we got everything that we shouldn't have known. What happens to John Connor? John Connor is actually the bad Terminator. All that, and we got it all in the trailers. And so by the time you actually go and see the film, there's no bloody point. It has some good points. It has some great action sequences, some really pretty nice CGI moments, but it destroys the timeline. It confuses the timeline. Even though Genesis was supposed to be a reboot, it was supposed to reboot the timeline. But again, it failed. It flopped, and it didn't do very well. With us going a little bit around the houses with that little bit there, let's get to the nitty-gritty. So, Terminator Dark Fate, we see Linda Hamilton, aka Sarah Connor, finally making a surprise, awesome return to that character. So, it's fantastic to see her back. And then, alongside Arnie, so he comes back to play another T-800. And then we have Gabriel Luna, but he is the Rev 9. He is playing the Rev 9, and I will get into a bit more about his character in a moment. Then we have Mackenzie Davis, plays a human resistance soldier from the future, but this character is heavily got cybernetic parts, so she's enhanced. She's an enhanced human. And then Natalie Reyes, she plays Danny, who is the main primary focus of this movie. So basically, if you kind of think that Danny is in essence in this movie is what John Connor was in Terminator 2, or Sarah Connor in Terminator 1. Primary characters that they are targeted by a Terminator that has come to target them specifically, and they have some sort of impact on a parallel universe, a parallel future. So basically that's who Danny is. She is the catalyst of this future that looks incredibly doomed, a bit like the whole idea with Skynet, but now it's no longer called Skynet. Skynet was defeated in Terminator 2. As we remember back in Terminator 2, it does recap and go back to that point at the beginning of the movie of Dark Fate. So it goes back to that time where you see the young Terminator 2 Linda Hamilton, and you see John Connor as a child, as a kid, but he's obviously now maybe 15 at this point. There was some sort of a 7-year gap, I would possibly like to guess, a 7-year gap between Terminator 2 and what happens. This is why I say you have one more chance to stop watching right now, because this is a major spoiler, and this is a pretty big thing that caused, there was another catalyst that caused a complete different future. John Connor is killed by a 7th T-800. We are made to be aware that there were 7 attempts at killing John since Terminator 2. And so Skynet was defeated, but there was one remaining, still functioning T-800 in that time, which would have been 1997, 98. So we're talking about a 7-year gap between 91 and this happening where John does actually get killed by a Terminator. And so that is what happens, and then that causes a catalyst, and that causes a whole new different future, dire future, to be awakened. No longer Skynet, it is now Legion. So we are now in the wake of Legion, which is the new AI intelligence threat that they are fighting against. That is who they are the ones that sent the Rev 9, and also Mackenzie Davis's character also comes from the same future. You are wanting to hear what I actually thought of the movie. So, what are my thoughts? What are my main opinions on Dark Fate? Now, I will be incredibly fair, and I will give credit where it's due in certain areas, okay? I believe it is nowhere near as good as Terminator 2. Like I said, Terminator 2 in the Terminator franchise is the pinnacle movie, just like Empire Strikes Back in the Star Wars franchise. So it's a very similar thing. Terminator 2 is the pinnacle movie, and you cannot really compare anything else to that pinnacle movie, because that is the movie that just works so well, you know. So with Dark Fate, this is a perfect sequel. In my opinion, it is a perfect sequel to T2. It destroys Rise of the Machines and Salvation and Genesis. It just feels it has identity. It feels it has an identity. It feels like it has soul. It feels like a Terminator film should feel like. Now, it isn't perfect. It's not a perfect movie, but it's a good, decent movie that I personally think the fans deserve a movie like this. You know, the action scenes with the Rev 9 in pursuit of Sarah, Danny, and I've forgotten her name now, but Mackenzie Davis's character. Basically, you know, they're on the run and the Rev 9's tracking them and after them, and those scenes of how intuitive and how incredibly versatile that Rev 9 is. The Rev 9 is one of my favourite Terminators now. You know, the T-800 has always been my favourite because the T-800 has always been the main staple unit. But obviously there's been others. There's the T-1000, which was in Terminator 2 as well, which was the Liquid Terminator. So this is kind of borrowing... it's kind of using, like, apparently Sam said, I went to see it with my mate Sam, and he said it is kind of using the chassis for the T-900. So it's like the chassis for the T-900, but kind of mixed up with like the Liquid-esque Terminator. So it's kind of like it's like an alternate version of the Liquid Terminator, but it actually has an actual metal chassis underneath, and they work independently of one another. As you would have seen from the trailers, he is able to replicate. So the liquid side of it becomes like a full physical humanoid version, and then what's left over is just the robot chassis that is still aware and can do whatever it wants. And I just love the Rev 9. The design, how menacing it is. In essence, it is what a Terminator should be. It is relentless. Like in Terminator 2 and Terminator 1, where you had the bad Arnie in Terminator 1, where he literally kills, destroys anybody in his wake to get his target. Same with the T-1000. He stopped at nothing to get to John. And the same with Dark Fate. Gabriel Luna as the Rev 9 was relentless. He just anybody again in his wake, he just destroyed. And it's just some of the special effects, some of the really awesome scenes where the Rev 9 is like, you know, like being blown up in an explosion, and the next minute the way that it kind of comes out and then starts to reattach again is so fluid and beautiful. But that's that. There is some little niggles that I didn't like. I felt the CGI suffered in certain areas. Mostly the action scenes. So there was a couple of action scenes where you could definitely tell it was a CGI render of Arnie and the Rev 9 or Gabriel Luna. They literally did look very... It wasn't as defined as it was for the close-ups of the Rev 9. I believe with what they've gone with the idea, they'll put more emphasis in right, like the Rev 9's right there. They'll put the emphasis in the CGI with that. And also when he replicates and becomes 2, the CGI is sublime in those scenes. But when they are fighting and they're lunging at each other, he's jumping, it really does look fake. And I do not like bad CGI. I like seamless. For the most part, the action scenes were really well done. It was really interesting to see Arnie, the T-800 in this movie. That, as you would have again seen from the trailers, he had a proper sentient conscience. And this is the first time, well, I won't say the first time, I would say the T-800 from Terminator 2 had a bit of a conscience about himself as well. He wasn't, but obviously in Dark Fate he's a lot more refined. Again, it's a different Arnie, it's a different T-800, it's not the same one as obviously the one from T2. He lowered himself into molten metal or something in order to fry the chip to stop Skynet. So that Arnie, both T1, the T1 and T2, those Arnies are both destroyed. So this is a fresh new one, and as I said at the beginning, there were several attempts at taking the life of John since T2 and Dark Fate. So this is the final T-800, I believe. We're led to believe this is the final one that actually managed to fulfill his target objectives and kills John Connor. But yeah, I did enjoy this movie. I do believe it is a very decent sequel to T2. It is nowhere near as good as T2. I believe I think it's better than the first Terminator movie. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. The Terminator 1 is iconic. It has incredible scenes, especially when he goes through the police station and just kills police left, right and centre. I love that scene. It's a fantastic movie. But T2 is literally, like I said, the pinnacle movie, and everything about it, the performances by Linda Hamilton, Edward Furlong as well as John Connor, he did a pretty good little job of playing John. And then Arnie, the chemistry between John and the T-800 or Arnie was really, really good chemistry. And this movie did have some good chemistry about it, but what's interesting is that the T-800 is very secondary in Dark Fate. He doesn't actually come into it until halfway through the movie. And he basically serves a purpose for the latter end, because this Rev 9 is so dangerous and so relentless, they cannot stop it on their own. They need the help of something else. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered. Apparently, James Cameron wants to do a new trilogy. I've no idea if we'll ever see the T-800 again, because the way that it's gone, Skynet is no more. Skynet is gone. But it's now Legion. It's now a completely different threat and a different types of Terminator units. And I'm really interested to see where the future goes, and I'm hoping this film does better. I have noticed the ratings on Rotten Tomatoes and other sites. It's pretty much average, but they're better than I thought they would be. But anyway, so thank you very much for watching. That has been my review on Terminator Dark Fate. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, stay awesome, and I will see you all very, very soon.